So my number two is Sherlock Holmes from 2009, directed by Guy Ritchie, the one and only,
Hmm.
starring Robert Downey Jr., Jude Law, Rachel McAdams, Mark Strong. Quick logline: Detective Sherlock Holmes and his stalwart partner Watson engage in a battle of wits and brawn with a nemesis whose plot is a threat to all of England. So this is the first in the series of the Sherlock Holmes movies by the same crew. I watched it in theaters when it came out, and I think instantly this movie, to me and my very close friend Jake,
Hmm.
still is one of my closest buddies, was sort of the epitome of coolness right off the bat. And I think part of it has to do with that both of us, we've always been very into kind of Victorian age, masculine fashion,
Hmm.
decor, the cool sort of libraries and leather chairs and books all over, and just how men dressed of a certain class, obviously, and means dressed and kind of went about. And this movie was a total indulgence in all of that. So I had not watched this movie since, so I'm very excited to kind of talk about how I feel about it now. But it kind of opened the door for me and my buddy, and we still talk about this, to really what this style and this era means for us. So, yeah, that's really why this is here. But
Ah.
I'm curious if you'd watched this movie before, and what did you think of its style?
Yeah, I'd seen it when it came out as well. Was a big Guy Ritchie fan. Really, mainly of his first two films I loved, and then he made a couple that I wasn't so pleased with, and was hoping this one would kind of bring him back into the fold.
Mhm.
I wasn't. I wasn't that impressed with it. I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan, and I didn't really like a lot of the takes that they did with this. I'd only seen this once in the theater back in 2009 until now, and because of the theme of this podcast, I paid a lot more attention to this in this viewing to the production design, the costumes, and really like those elements of this film are by far the strongest elements of it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's I don't want to say beautiful looking because a lot of it is dirty, but the production design is just very, very well done.
yeah,
And the costuming, it really does look like a version of Victorian London that's a little more gritty than other movies might have done, more like the Guy Ritchie kind of street level sensibilities. But yeah, like I was very, very impressed with how this movie looked. I still think it's passable. Like
oh
the
yeah,
story is not that interesting. It's
no,
kind of boring. But I really I thought the costumes and the set design definitely stood out. So
yeah.
I can see why that would have hit you at the time and why you wanted to put it on the list.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And over time, and since then, I really got into, the 80s BBC Sherlock, and I've watched Poirot like a 2 bajillion times since, and, every sort of British mystery thing that's out there. I think I mentioned on the podcast before, this is all my family watches
Mm-hmm.
all the time. So, I, and I think I sort of started to appreciate that era, but this was sort of was an intro, I think,
Uh-huh.
in like a big way. But yeah, rewatching the movie, yeah, the takes on Sherlock and sort of the heightenedness of it all, like it doesn't really, work. It's entertaining for sure. So I think there's that happening. Yeah, the standout for me, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on both of the guys, but
Mm.
Jude Law is the standout to me in this movie, at least from a style and fashion standpoint, and also just his character. I mean, it's not a very well characterized movie in my mind. It's pretty surface level, but whatever little bit you see, I think you see in Jude Law. And I also think his clothes are the best. So maybe I'm partial to that. And his look is amazing. I mean, Robert Downey Jr., I like him a lot as a persona, but I feel like it's once again an audition tape for Iron Man. It's the same
Mm.
persona, I think. He looks very good with, a slight British accent, but
Yeah, a non-British Sherlock Holmes.
yeah,
I don't know if that would fly today or why it really necessarily did back then, but yeah, I don't. It's interesting. Like on paper, I think a lot of the things that they're trying to do with this are fresh and different. I think for me, the Watson was other than just being a little younger than Watsons are typically in other versions of Holmes. Wasn't anything new or different I felt about the
No.
character. I thought that what they were doing with Sherlock and what Downey Jr. was doing is definitely like turning up more of the like the quirkiness than the regular Sherlock Holmes was more of a like he was definitely odd. He was an odd guy, but he wasn't so like quirky like a Doctor Who or something like that. And I think
Right.
that is definitely what Downey Jr. is bringing into this. And I think the conceit that they have of, well, let's make him into an action star by, well, if he can deduce everything, he could deduce and a fight scene. Again, on paper, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. That's something different. We haven't seen that in a Holmes
Yeah.
adaptation before, but it just wears kind of thin and
I
I sort of
agree.
lose interest. So I think Watson looks great. Like Jude Law looks fantastic in the movie, but in terms of what he's bringing to the Watson character, I think Robert Downey Jr. is actually bringing something different to Holmes. Whether it works or
Yeah.
not,
At
debatable,
the
but
very least, it's
it's
different. Yeah.
different, right? And that's the thing that even at the time I gave acknowledgement to Guy Ritchie just creatively about what they were trying to do, a little bit of a different, more action-oriented take on Holmes, which
Hmm.
hadn't really been done before. And I appreciate the different the swing at it, even though for me it just ends up being kind of one note, boring, and the actual plot and the mystery just aren't interesting enough,
Not
especially
interesting
for a
enough.
Holmes story, which is supposed
Yeah.
to be what's pulling you in. They try to think that the action would do that, and
Yeah.
it was fine, but it wasn't
It's
anything that
fine.
amazing.
I totally agree. And, like I was saying, as I watch more of these classic mystery shows, like for me, so much of the joy is the quietness of these shows. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're quite gentle,
Mm-hmm.
they're in sleepy, small, beautiful, picturesque, English villages and towns, and things move slowly, and then something really sinister or bad happens, which is part of the story. So, yeah, to your point, on paper, the action orientedness sounds like a cool idea, but it actually doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
I will say the score is pretty amazing. And I
Oh
thought that
yes.
even back then, and it used to be on my rotation of scores. I mean, it's Hans Zimmer, so of course. So I think that still held up for me, that it propels the movie and adds some energy to it, but yet has its roots in that period, which I thought is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a good shout out actually. And I at the time who I'm a big Hans Zimmer fan, and even back
Yeah.
then he was one of my favorite composers. And I don't remember really liking the score when I first
Oh,
saw the movie in 2009. And since then, he's done a lot of live shows. Unfortunately, I haven't got a chance to see them, but I have some recordings of those
yeah.
performances, and they do play the home score. And in
Yeah.
listening to that, I've gotten more into liking that score and thinking it's kind of cool. And then going back and watching the movie with the score in the film, I definitely appreciate and really like the score a lot. It stands out, and I think is one of his better like sort of I guess Holmes is a franchise, but
True.
non-franchise work like outside of Batman and outside of Nolan. I think it's some of the strongest things Hans Zimmer's done in the last 20 years. So
Totally
that's
agree.
a good shout out. I should have mentioned that myself too.
No, that was pretty great. And then I thought Rachel McAdams, again, she doesn't have much to do, but she's great. I was so happy to see her. I'm
Yeah,
always happy to see her. She's so great.
I
So that
agree.
was a fun surprise. I'd forgotten that she was in this movie.
Yeah. She does it. She does do a really good job in this as
Yeah.
well. Have you seen the sequel to this film?
I maybe, but I don't remember anything. All I remember is that it wasn't very good. So I don't think I finished it. Or
Yeah,
yeah.
I recently watched it for the first time in like the last
Ah,
year, and it just is not. It's very passable, forgettable. In comparison, this movie I think has a lot more energy and is more interesting.
yeah, yeah. Which is sad because I think this is how Guy Ritchie is now in my mind. Like it's sort of surface level cool and a lot of like street fight thing, but the overarching product is not great. And in retrospect, this is probably still a high point. Since then, it's sort of been like a dip. And I saw like an ad the other day, Guy Ritchie's. I'm like, are we still branding movies with Guy Ritchie's blah blah blah? I think he has something new that's
Yeah,
just
he
come
does
out.
a war film. Yeah, an
Yeah,
Afghanistan war film. Yeah,
yeah,
I was surprised by that too. The over the title
yeah. I'm like, do
name.
people know who he is? I guess.
Yeah, it's I have not seen that film, but I'll shout out The Gentleman from a couple years ago was and
Oh,
actually The Man from Uncle. If you haven't seen those two films, those
yeah.
are very good ways to apply the Guy Ritchie formula to a big budget film. And I think he was
Mhm.
trying that for a while, even with this film to less success. I mean, nothing can hold a candle to Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels or
Right.
Snatch. I think he works better at that level. But I will shout out if folks haven't seen Man from Uncle or The Gentleman. I would definitely give those a try. They're very fun movies. I think actually stronger than this one.
Oh wow. Yeah, Man for Uncle I do want to watch because it'll definitely play to my 60s
Oh yeah, there's
style sensibilities
a
as
lot
well.
of great a lot of great style bits in that too, and Army
Yeah.
Hammer and Cavill are fantastic in it. Hey there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through 3 of our favorite movies. Subscribe right now, or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.